Om Ajnanam Timirandasya Jnanajnashalakhya Chakshurunmiltamana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Chaitanyamanopistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swarupam Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagadatam Sahiranavunatvatam Tam Sajivam Sadhuvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahiran Lalita Shiv Vishakavidam Cha नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पार्षदेशतारिणे हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपे कांत राधा कांत नमस्ते तप्त कंचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृष्मान सुते देवी प्रणममि हरि प्रिये जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसति गौर वृंदावन च कल्पतरुभ्य कृपा सिंधु एव च पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जगत गुरु श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। Sharing my screen now. And then we can yes, Ashwini Prabhuji.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. So, family illusion. Prahlad Maharaj told his friends, "You have to begin Krishna consciousness immediately." All the boys were born of atheistic, materialistic families, but fortunately, they had the association of Prahlad, who was a great devotee of the Lord from his birth. Whenever he found an opportunity when the teachers was out of the classroom, he used to say, "My dear friends, let us chant Hare Krishna. This is the time to begin Krishna consciousness."
Shri Prabhu.
Now, as we have stated, some boy might have said, but we are just boys, let us play. We are not going to die immediately. Let us have some enjoyment, and later we shall begin Krishna consciousness. People do not know that Krishna consciousness is the highest enjoyment. They think that the boys and the girls are who movement are foolish. By Krishna, by Prabhupada's influence, they have enjoyed Krishna consciousness and left everything enjoyable. But actually, this is not so. They are all intelligent, educated boys and girls coming from very respectable families. They are not fools. In our society, they are actually enjoying their life. Otherwise, they would have not have sacrificed their valuable time for this moment. Hare Krishna.
Deepak Prabhu.
Yes, Guruji. Actually, there is joyful life in Krishna consciousness, but people do not know of it. They say, what use is this Krishna consciousness? When one grows up entangled in the sense gratification process, it is very difficult to get out of it. Therefore, according to the Vedic regulations, in student life, beginning from 5 years of age, boys are taught about spiritual life. This is called brahmacharya. A brahmachari dedicates his life to attaining supreme consciousness, Krishna consciousness or Brahman consciousness.
Brahmacharya. Brahmacharya has many rules and regulations. For example, however rich one's father may be, the brahmachari surrenders himself to be trained under the guidance of a spiritual master and works in the ashram of the spiritual master just like a menial servant. How is this possible? We are getting actual experience that very nice boys coming from very respectable families do not hesitate to do any kind of work here. They are washing dishes, cleansing floors, everything. One student's mother was astonished at her boy when he visited home. Before, he would not even go to the store, and now he is engaged 24 hours a day. Unless one feels pleasure, how is it possible that he can engage himself in such a process as Krishna consciousness? This is due only to the chanting of Hare Krishna. This is our single asset, the Hare Krishna mantra. One can be very jolly simply by Krishna consciousness. Actually, it is a joyful life, but unless one is trained, one cannot live it. Yes.
Prahlad Maharaj says that everyone is attached to family of action. If one is attached to family affairs, he cannot control his senses. Naturally, everyone wants to love someone. Society, friendship, and love are needed. They are demands of the spirit soul, but they are being perverted, reflected. I have seen that many ladies and gentlemen in your country have no family life, but they have placed their love in cats and dogs because they want to love someone, but they do not see anyone suitable. They place their valuable love in cats and dogs. Our concern is to transfer this love, which has to be placed somewhere, to Krishna. This is Krishna consciousness. If you transfer your love to Krishna, that is perfection. But now, because people are being frustrated and cheated, they do not know where to place their love. And at last, they place their love in cats and dogs.
Okay. Issue Prabhu.
Everyone is entangled by material love. It is very difficult to develop spiritual life when one is advanced in material love because this bondage of love is very strong. Therefore, Prahlad proposes that one should learn Krishna consciousness from childhood. When a child is when a child is 5 or 6 year old, as soon as his Krishna consciousness is developed, he should be sent to school to be trained. And Prahlad Maharaj says that his education should be Krishna consciousness from the very beginning. The period from 5 to 15 years is very valuable time. You can train your child in Krishna consciousness and he will become perfect. Hare Krishna.
Jiva Prabhu.
Yes, Rudy. If a child is not trained in Krishna consciousness and instead becomes advanced in materialism, it is difficult for him to develop spiritual life. What is materialism? Materialism means that all of us in this material world, although we are spirit souls, somehow or other want to enjoy this material world. The spirit of enjoyment is present in its pure form in the spiritual world in relation to Krishna, but we have come here to partake of contaminated enjoyment, just as a man on the Bowery thinks he can enjoy by drinking some liquor. The basic principle of material enjoyment is sex. Therefore, you will find some sex not only in human society but in cat society, dog society, bird society, everywhere. During the daytime, a pigeon had sex at least 20 times. This is his enjoyment.
The Srimad Bhagavatam confirms that material enjoyment is based upon nothing more than the sexual combination of man and woman. In the beginning, a boy thinks, "Oh, that girl is nice," and the girl says, "That boy is nice." When they meet, that material contamination becomes more prominent. And when they actually enjoy sex, they become more attached, completely attached. How? As soon as baby and girl are married, they want an apartment. Then they have children. And when they have children, they want social recognition, society, friendship, and love. In this way, their material attachment goes on increasing. And all of this requires money. A man who is too materialistic will cheat anyone, kill anyone, beg, borrow, or steal anything to bring money. He knows that his buildings, his family, his wife, and children cannot continue to exist perpetually. They are just like bubbles in the ocean. They have come into existence, and after a little while, they will be gone. But he is too much attached. He will sacrifice. He will sacrifice his spiritual advancement for the pursuit of money to maintain them. His perverted consciousness. I'm this body. I belong to this material world. I belong to this country. I belong to this community. I belong to this religion. I belong to this families. Become greater and greater. Yes, Suji.
Where is this? Where is his Krishna consciousness? He becomes so entangled that money becomes more valuable to him than his own life. In other words, he can risk his life for money. The householder, the laborer, merchant, thief, the dacoit, the rogue, everyone is after money. This is illusion. One loses himself in the midst of this entanglement.
Prahlad Maharaj says that in this state, when you are too much implicated in materialism, you cannot cultivate Krishna consciousness. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from early childhood. Of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so kind that he says, better late than never. Even though you miss the opportunity to begin Krishna consciousness from childhood, begin now. In whatever position you are. That is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching. He never said, because you do not begin Krishna consciousness from childhood, you cannot make progress. No, he is very kind. He has given us the nice process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Whether you are young or old, no matter what you are, just begin. You do not know when your life will be finished. If you chant sincerely, even a small amount, it will have a great effect. It will save you from the greatest danger becoming an animal in your next life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Although only 5 years old, Prahlad Maharaj speaks just like a very experienced and educated man because he received knowledge from his spiritual master Narad Muni. This is disclosed in the next chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam 7.7. Wisdom does not depend on age, but on knowledge received from a superior source. One cannot become a wise man simply by advancement of age. No, that is not possible. Knowledge has to be received from a superior source. Then one can become wise. It does not matter whether one is a 5-year-old boy or a 50-year-old man. As it is said, by wisdom one becomes an old man even without advanced age.
Okay. So although Prahlad was only 5 years old, by advancement in knowledge, he was imparting perfect instruction to his classmates. Some may find these instructions unpalatable. Suppose a man is already married and Prahlad says, take to Krishna consciousness. He will think, oh, how can I leave my wife? We talk so nicely together, sit together and enjoy. How can I leave? Family attraction is very strong. That's true.
I am an old man, 20, 72 years old. I have been away from my family during the last 14 years. Yet sometimes I also think of my wife and children. This is quite natural, but that does not mean I have to go back. This is knowledge. When the mind wanders to thoughts of sense gratification, one should at once understand this is illusion.
According to the Vedic system, one has to foreseeably give up family life at the age of 50. One must go. There is no alternative. The first 25 years are of student life, from the age 5 to age 25. One should be educated very nicely in Krishna consciousness. The basic principle of one's education should be Krishna consciousness, nothing else. Then life will be pleasing and successful, both in this world and in the next. A Krishna consciousness education means one is trained to give up material consciousness altogether. That is perfect Krishna consciousness.
But if the student is unable to capture the essence of Krishna consciousness, then he is allowed to marry a good wife and live a peaceful householder life. And because he has been trained in the basic principles of Krishna consciousness, he will not entangle himself in the material world. One who lives simply, plain living, and high thinking can make progress in Krishna consciousness, even within family life. Proji, I am audible or my
Yeah,
voice
you're
is.
audible. You're audible, Suji. Anything you want to ask, Suji? Give a proof?
Nothing, nothing.
Okay. So family life is not condemned. But if a man forgets his spiritual entity and simply becomes entangled in material affairs, then he is lost. His life's mission is lost. If one thinks, I cannot protect myself from the attack of sex desire, then let him be married. That is prescribed. But don't have illicit sex. If you want a girl, if you want a boy, get married and live in Krishna consciousness. Yes, Suji.
person who is trained in Krishna consciousness from childhood naturally becomes disinclined toward the material law of life, and at the age of 50, he gives it up. How does he start giving it up? The husband and wife leave home and travel together on pilgrimage. If from 25 to 51 remains in family life, one should have some grown up children. So at age 50, the husband entrusts the family affairs to some of his sons who are family men, and he and his wife go on pilgrimage to the holy places in order to forget family attachments. When the gentleman is completely matured in detachment, he asks his wife to go home to their children, and he remains alone. That is the Vedic system. We have to give ourselves a chance to progress in spiritual life, step by step. Otherwise, if we remain attached to family consciousness throughout all our days, we will not perfect our Krishna consciousness, and we shall miss the opportunity of this human form of life.
So-called happy family life means that we have a very loving, thus we enjoy life. But we do not know that this enjoyment is false. That is that it is resting on a false platform. At once, in the dwelling of an eye, we have to give up the enjoyment. That is not death is not under our control. From the Bhagavad Gita, we learn that if one dies while too much attached to one's wife, the result will be that in his next life he will be have the body of a woman. And if the wife is very attached to her husband, she will get a man's body in her in her next life. Similarly, if you are not a family man but are attached to a cat and dog, then your next life will be a cat or dog. These are law of karmas or material nature.
The whole point is that one should begin Krishna consciousness immediately. Suppose one thinks, after finishing my sporting life when I am old and there is nothing else to do, then I shall go to the Krishna consciousness society and hear something. Certainly at that time one can take up spiritual life, but what is the assurance that one will live to an old age? One may die at any time, so postponing one's spiritual life is very risky. Therefore, one should take the opportunity now to advance in Krishna consciousness. That is the purpose of this society, to give everyone a chance to begin Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. And by the process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, advancement is very quick. There is an immediately result.
Okay. We request all the ladies and gentlemen who are very kindly attending our lectures or reading our literature to chant Hare Krishna during your leisure hours at home and to read our books. That is our request. We are sure that you will find this process very pleasing and very effective. Chapter 4, I love Krishna more than anything. Yes, Suji.
Now, Prahlad Maharaj makes a further statement about the complications of material life. He compares the attached householder to the silkworm. The silkworm wraps itself in a cocoon made of its own saliva until he is in a prison from which he cannot escape. In the same way, a materialistic householder's entanglement becomes so tight that he cannot come out of the cocoon of family attraction. Even though there are so many miseries in materialistic life, he cannot break free. Why? He thinks that sex life and eating palatable dishes are more important. Therefore, in spite of so many miserable conditions, he cannot give them up.
In this way, when a person is too much entangled in family life, he cannot think of his real benefit. To escape from material life, although he is always disturbed by the threefold miseries of materialistic life, still, because of a strong family affection, he cannot come out. He does not know that he is wasting his limited duration of life simply for family affection. He is simply he is spoiling the life that was meant for realizing his eternal self. for realizing his real spiritual life.
Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj says to his demonic friends, please give up the company of those who are simply after material enjoyment. Just associate with the person who have taken to Krishna consciousness. That, that is his advice. He says to his friend that this Krishna consciousness is easy to attain. Why Krishna consciousness is actually very dear to us, but we have forgotten it. Therefore, anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness becomes more and more affected by it and forget his material consciousness.
If you are in foreign country, you might forget your home and your family members and friends who are very dear to you. But if you are all of you sudden reminded of your home and friends, you will at once become very preoccupied. How shall I meet them? In San Francisco, one of our friends told me that long ago he left his young children and went to another country. Recently, a letter came from his grown up son, and at once the father remembered his affection for him and sent some money. The affection automatically came, even though he had forgotten his child for so many years. Similarly, our affection for Krishna is intimate, that as soon as there is some touch of Krishna consciousness, we at once revive our relationship with him. Just to-
Everyone has some particular relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Lord, which he has forgotten. But as we become Krishna conscious, gradually our old consciousness of our relationship with Krishna is revived. And when our consciousness is actually in the clear stage, we can understand our particular relationship with Krishna. One may have a relationship with Krishna as a son or servant, as a friend, as a parent, as a beloved wife or lover. All these relationships are perverted, reflected in life in the material world. But as soon as we come to the platform of Krishna consciousness, our old relationship with Krishna is revived.
Ishu
We love every one of us. First, I love my body because myself is within this body. So actually, I love myself better than the body. But that self has an intimate relationship with Krishna because the self is a part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, I love Krishna more than anything. And because Krishna is all pervading, I love everything.
Fortunately, we have forgotten that Krishna, God is all pervading. This memory has to be revived. As soon as we revive our Krishna consciousness, we can see everything in relationship with Krishna and then everything becomes lovable. Now I love you or you love me, but that love is on the platform of this ephemeral body. But when love of Krishna is developed, I will love not I will love not only you but every living entity because the outward designality will be forgotten. When a person becomes fully Krishna consciousness, he does not think there is a man, here is an animal, here is a cat, here is a dog, here is a worm. He sees everyone as part and parcel of Krishna. This is very nicely explained in the Bhagavad Gita. One who is actually learning Krishna consciousness becomes the lover of everyone in the universe. Unless one is situated on the Krishna conscious platform, there is no question of universal brotherhood.
if we actually want to implement the idea of universal brotherhood, then we will have to come to the platform of Krishna consciousness, not material consciousness. As long as we are in material consciousness, our lovable objects will be limited. But when we are actually in Krishna consciousness, our lovable objects will be universal. That is stated by Prahlad Maharaj. Beginning from the non-moving plants and trees and extending up to the highest living creature, Brahma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present everywhere by his expansion as the Paramatma, the feature of the Lord in everyone's heart. As soon as we become Krishna conscious, that extension of Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, induces us to love every object in relation with Krishna. Okay, so we can stop here and start with the learning and realization. Yes, we can start from his day session, Guruji.
Yeah, thank you, Dhruv. मैं एक पॉइंट है, एक तो ये कि मुझे पॉइंट अच्छा लगा जैसे प्रभुपाद बता रहे हैं कि we love ourselves more than our own bodies. तो हालांकि ये ज्ञान होता है जिसमें हमको लगता है कि वी आर द बॉडीज एंड हम ये समझें कि वी आर द सोल्स, बट ये भी एक अलग पॉइंट है जिसमें हम जानते समझ में आता है कि इवन जो लोग अज्ञान में हैं, जो लोग कह रहे हैं कि वी आर द बॉडीज, वो भी अपने से इतना प्रेम करते हैं, सेल्फ से, सोल से इतना प्रेम करते हैं कि केवल बॉडी को भी छोड़ने को तैयार हो जाते हैं, जिसमें सुसाइड कर लेते हैं, बिकॉज दे लव सो मच themselves that they leave their bodies also if they are if the body is troubling them, like anxiety, stress, any situation होता है तो बोले no, this body is troubling us, they go and suicide. So we love ourselves so much, and the person who can say that okay, we are the body, so we can quickly explain that no, we love ourselves actually, not the body. We are not the body, we are the soul. Second point is Prabhupada is mentioning that as the nature of the soul, we all want to love and to be loved. That is the nature of the soul, that we want to love and we want to be loved, which means that in this material world, every living entity is working to please someone and to be pleased by someone, which means there is someone who you are working for, so he becomes pleased. Like we are working to become someone, so society is pleased and we get back that reciprocation. So in that sense, everyone is working like Prabhupada, in Prabhupada words, like everyone is working like as day and night. Why? Because you cannot please the other person the way he wants to be pleased. Why? Because we are not the Paramatma sitting in his heart. And similarly, the way we are pleased, the other person does not know perfectly. And in this rat race of pleasing each other, everyone is frustrated. So that is why, as a part and parcel of Krishna, and as our nature to love and to be loved by someone, the living entity's responsibility is to please Krishna. And in that exchange of loving relationship, he can be eternally happy. The third point is regarding the sense gratification. In our body, we have all our senses, like we have nose, ears, eyes, skin. So, out of all these senses, the sex impulse is the strongest sense impulse, which means, for example, the tongue is there. If I want to eat something, I can easily control it because there is impulse of only one senses, right? So nose is ear is there, for example, and I want to hear some funky music, so I can even try to control it. It though it is difficult, but still it is manageable. I can still manage it. But this in the sex impulse, what happens? All the senses are engaged. That is why it becomes very very difficult for sex impulse to control. It's not only genitals of the body, but all the senses are engaged. The touch is there, smell is there, music, ears are there. So, because all the senses are engaged, it becomes difficult for someone to control all the senses. That is why sex impulse is a very, very first thing in spiritual life to control. It is said that if one cannot control the sex impulse, he cannot progress in the spiritual life. Why? Because all the senses are engaged, and if someone has controlled all these senses, yes, he can easily progress in the spiritual life. That is, it is the foremost thing that uh, we duly engage in spiritual life, so we can easily control the sex life. There is no question of sex when one is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness. So the question of controlling itself, Prabhupada, in one of the one interview was asking Prabhupada that how do you control lust? Prabhupada was saying, where is the time for lust? So we should engage so much in Krishna consciousness that those the strongest impulse of the body is easily controlled. That's it from my side. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Guruji. That is really very practical reference you have given to us. Thank you. Ishu Prabhu, you want to say something?
प्रभुपाद ने इस मतलब ये टीचिंग्स में फैमिली अटैचमेंट्स के भी जो बात कर रहे थे, तो आई रिमेम्बर वन ऑफ द लेक्चर आई वाज लिसनिंग ऑफ प्रभुपाद कि उसमें कुंती महारानी की प्रेयर्स को एक्सप्लेन कर रहे थे प्रभुपाद। तो उसमें ऐसा बता रहे थे कि कुंती महारानी ऐसा प्रेयर कर रही थी कि उन्हें फैमिली अटैचमेंट से मतलब लिबरेट करने की बात कर रही थी वो भगवान से कि because of these attachment I cannot engage myself in your service, ऐसा कुंती महारानी प्रेयर कर रही थी, ऐसा मतलब शॉर्ट रिलेटेड था। तो उसमें प्रभुपाद बता रहे थे कि फैमिली अटैच मतलब प्रभुपाद फैमिली जो वो जो अट्रैक्शन होता है उसका एग्जांपल दे रहे थे कि ये माया की रिवर है, इट्स अ सॉर्ट ऑफ फ्लो ऑफ रिवर ऑफ माया की ये जो नदी बह रही है इसके अंदर जो लकड़ियां हैं वो फैमिली से प्रभुपाद कह रहे थे कि वो आइडेंटिफाई कर रहे थे फैमिली से कि ये लकड़ियां कुछ समय के लिए एक साथ आ जाती हैं, जैसे नदी में बहते हुए कुछ कंकड़ और पत्थर एक साथ आ जाते हैं, कुछ समय के लिए रहते हैं और उसके बाद फिर दोबारा माया का फ्लो आता है, एक और मतलब नदी के अंदर भाव आता है, तो फिर उसके बाद सारे बिखर जाते हैं। तो दिस इज हाउ प्रभुपाद इज एक्सप्लेनिंग द मतलब फैमिली मतलब जो आपका अट्रैक्शन और अटैचमेंट रहता है वो उतने ही पल के लिए रहता है, उसके बाद चला जाता है, बट स्टिल वी गेट इन द इल्यूजन, तो हम उसी को समझते हैं कि ये परमानेंट है कि नहीं है। तो एक्चुअली प्रभुपाद है ना एक और वर्ड का यूज करते हैं उसी लेक्चर के अंदर, वो बताते प्रभुपाद जो बता रहे थे प्रहलाद मतलब प्रभुपाद इसी इसमें बता रहे थे कि आफ्टर सम टाइम आफ्टर 50 ईयर ऑफ एज आपको वानप्रस्थ के लिए जाना पड़ता है, यू हैव टू गो फॉर द होली पिलग्रिमेज सारी प्लेसेस पे अपनी वाइफ के साथ और मे बी अलोन टू डिटैच योरसेल्फ। तो प्रभुपाद उस शब्द इस पर्टिकुलर के लिए एक शब्द यूज कर रहे थे सिविल सुसाइड नाम का, कि प्रभुपाद बता रहे थे कि यू हैव टू कमिट सिविल सुसाइड, दैट आपको अपनी सारी फैमिली अटैचमेंट्स खत्म करनी पड़ेंगी एंड इट इज मस्ट एंड कंपल्शन, शैल वर्ड का यूज कर रहे थे प्रभुपाद इसमें कि इट इज द नेसेसरी थिंग टू डू। या सो ये प्रभुपाद के और बाकी सारी टीचिंग्स में बस यही फर्क लगता है कि प्रभुपाद है ना प्रैक्टिकल वो टिप्स देते हैं इसको हैंडल करने के लिए, मैनेज करने के लिए, क्योंकि आज की जनरेशन में सब लैला मजनू है एंड दैट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट कि उन्हें लगता है कि प्यार कर रहे हैं तो हम किसी के साथ गलत थोड़ी ना कर रहे हैं, तो उनके अंदर ये मेंटालिटी चलती है कि हम ऐसा क्या गलत कर रहे हैं, वी आर लिविंग आवर ओन लाइफ। तो बट सारी चीजें कॉम्प्रोमाइज हो जाती है वंस पीपल गेट अट्रैक्टेड टू अदर पर्सन, तो हम चीजें कॉम्प्रोमाइज करने लगते हैं स्पिरिचुअली भी और मटेरियली भी इन मेनी वेज। तो या दिस इज व्हाट आई थॉट कि प्रभुपाद के जो टिप्स हैं बहुत ज्यादा प्रैक्टिकल है। या दैट
थैंक यू प्रभु जी। वो बहुत अच्छा लगा, मतलब जो आपने पिक करा ना वो नदी वाला जो एग्जांपल था, अगर हम मतलब मैं सुनते सुनते इमेजिन करा था वो हकीकत में यही है कि नदी है और उसमें कुछ कंकड़ मिल गए, बहाव से ही मिले और बहाव से ही वो अलग हो जाएंगे। तो आई थिंक वो बहुत सही था वो। थैंक यू सो मच। दीपक प्रभु, यू वांट टू शेयर समथिंग? तो जी आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है।
हरे कृष्णा।
यस प्रभु जी।
मैं कह रहा था मुझे थोड़ी तबीयत ठीक नहीं है तो
अच्छा अच्छा, प्लीज प्लीज टेक रेस्ट प्रभु जी, नो इशू। मेरा एक डाउट था प्रभु जी, जैसे अभी मतलब हम करते हैं कि मरते टाइम जो हम सोच रहे होते हैं वही हमारी गति होती है अगले जन्म में, तो वो मुझे थोड़ा समझ नहीं आता कि अगर मान के चलिए कि मरते मरते एक आदमी सोच रहा है कि एक आदमी सोच रहा है कि भाई मतलब जैसे कैट है, ठीक है, कि मेरी बिल्ली का क्या होगा या फिर मेरे कुत्ते का क्या होगा, है ना? तो मतलब वो उसकी केयर करना चाहता है, लेकिन अगले जन्म में वो कुत्ता या बिल्ली ही बन जाता है। तो मतलब आइडियली तो वो बनना चाहिए ना जिसकी वो केयर करना चाह रहा है, मतलब एक ऐसी एंटिटी जो कि केयर कर सके, लेकिन वो खुद वो ही बन जाता है, तो ऐसा क्यों होता है?
जितना मैं समझा प्रभु जी, तो प्रभुपाद समझा है कि हम लोग लास्ट में वही जो हमारी कॉन्शियसनेस में रहता है एक्चुअली उसी का चिंतन हम करते हैं। मतलब चिंतन जैसे अभी हम किसी भी चीज का चिंतन करते रहते हैं ना, फैमिली का चिंतन करते रहते हैं, ऑफिस का चिंतन करते रहते हैं, मोदी जी क्या कर रहे हैं चिंतन करते रहते हैं, रशिया यूक्रेन क्या चल रहा है ये सब चिंतन करते हैं, चिंतन चिंतन ऐसे चिंतन तो बहुत सारी चीजों का चालू रहता है। बट अंत समय जब आता है तो उस समय हम उस चीज का चिंतन करते हैं जिस चीज से हम बहुत ज्यादा अटैच हैं। और आप अटैच किससे चीज से सबसे ज्यादा होते हो? जिसको आप सबसे ज्यादा प्रेम करते हो।
जी।
नहीं,
यस यस।
इस चीज से मान लीजिए कोई पॉलिटिशियन है, वो कंट्री से सबसे ज्यादा प्रेम करता है, मरते समय कंट्री के बारे में ही सोच रहा होगा। कोई फैमिली मैन है, फैमिली से बहुत प्रेम करता है, मरते समय फैमिली के बारे में ही सोच रहा होगा। तो चिंतन तो प्रेम से आता है। तो लास्ट में जब मान लीजिए कोई व्यक्ति है, कैट डॉग के बारे में सोचा, इसका मतलब वो कैट डॉग से बहुत प्रेम करता है, कितनी अच्छी है कैट डॉग, कितना अच्छा है ये वो। तो भगवान कृपालु है, वो कहते हैं ठीक है, तुम्हें ये बॉडी पसंद है तो तुम यही बॉडी रख लो। फैमिली पसंद है तो ठीक है, फैमिली में ही तुम उसको कुछ, जैसे कैलाश करके व्यक्ति नहीं था, उसको फैमिली में ही छोड़ देते हैं कि ठीक लो, फैमिली में ही तुम डॉग बन जाओ। तो वही सोचते हैं कि ठीक है, तेरा इस तरह की बॉडी से, इस तरह की एंटिटी से प्रेम है, तो वापस मैं तुझे वहीं पे प्लेस कर देता हूँ। वैसा है।
लेकिन ऐसा है कि जैसे लेट्स सपोज कि मतलब वो अगर कैट को, समवन इज लविंग कैट, तो वो कैट को ऐसे प्यार कर रहा है कि मैं उसकी केयर करना चाहता हूँ, ये नहीं समझ के प्यार कर रहा कि मैं भी कैट बन जाऊं।
हाँ, तो चिंतन फिर कोई दिक्कत नहीं है ना, अगर वो ये मान के चल रहा है कि भाई everyone is part and parcel of Krishna, है ना, and I have to take the responsibility of this cow, this my child, my five, and फिर उसके बाद वो उसकी तो मेंटेलिटी वो अटैचमेंट वाली नहीं है, तो फिर कोई दिक्कत नहीं है।
उसके साथ तो
मतलब उसकी
भगवान की,
कॉन्शियसनेस में ये,
लेकिन उसके साथ तो भगवान से अटैच्ड है वो, होता है फिर।
वो तो भगवान से अटैच है, फिर कोई दिक्कत एक्चुअली वो अंत समय में ना फिर उनके बारे में नहीं सोचेगा, भगवान के बारे में ही सोचेगा, क्योंकि उसको तो पता है कि भगवान तो हमेशा है। ऐसा तो है नहीं कि जैसे वो जा रहा है तो भगवान भी किसी दिन चले जाएंगे, उसे पता है भगवान इटर्नल है। Then he will think of God only because Krishna will take care of his entities. मतलब यहाँ पे जो मेन जो बात है ना, वो आसक्ति की है।
मतलब अगर
आसक्ति
कोई,
मतलब मैं मेरा।
अगर कोई देश का सोच के मर रहा है कि मैं तो देश पे जान दे दी, ये देश मेरे लिए प्रायोरिटी है, तो वो क्या बनेगा फिर?
उसी पार्टी में आ जाएगा जिस
हाँ?
पार्टी के लिए वो सर्व कर रहा हो। मतलब उसी पार्टी में कुछ ना कुछ पोजीशन पे आ जाएगा, ताकि वो उसी पार्टी में रहे। जैसे मतलब बीजेपी का कोई व्यक्ति है, देश के बारे में सोच रहा है, या कोई आर्मी मैन है जो देश के बारे में सोच रहा है कि अरे मैं बॉर्डर की रक्षा कौन करेगा, मैं तो यहाँ खड़ा रहता था बंदूक लेके, तो पाकिस्तान से कोई नहीं आ पाता था। तो ठीक है, वो बॉर्डर पे ही कोई ना कोई जानवर या कुछ ऐसा बन जाएगा ताकि बॉर्डर पे ही रहे।
ठीक है। यस तो जी, ठीक है। बाकी तो यस तो जी सब कवर कर ही लिया।
अल्टीमेटली मैटर ये है, आसक्ति का है। मतलब अल्टीमेटली जो अटैचमेंट है ना, दैट इज अ प्रॉब्लम। इसलिए भक्ति योग में बोल रहे हैं कि जैसे मायावाद क्या बोलते हैं, मायावाद बोलते हैं नैति नैति नैति। मायावाद फिलोसफी क्या है? नैति नैति नैति, मतलब ये भी नहीं, ये भी नहीं, ये भी नहीं। हाँ, तो उनको ये तो पता चल जाता है कि सेंस ग्रेटिफिकेशन जो है वो बहुत गलत चीज है। उन्हें ये पता चल जाता है, उनको पता चल जाता है आसक्ति गलत है ना। तो बोलते हैं इस आसक्ति को खत्म करो। तो कहते हैं नैति नैति, बहुत अच्छा मत खाओ, बहुत अच्छा मत सुनो, ये नहीं है। क्योंकि उनको पता है जितना ही जो सेंसेस को जितना फीड करेंगे उतनी उनकी आसक्ति बढ़ेगी, इसलिए वो नैति नैति वाले फंडे में आ जाते हैं। बट उस फिलोसफी में प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि उनको रिप्लेसमेंट नहीं पता है। तो होगा क्या कि सेंसेस तो प्लेजर के लिए ढूंढ ही रही हैं, कुछ ना कुछ भागती रहती हैं। तो अगर वो नैति नैति अभी करते रहेंगे तो कुछ दिनों बाद उनको ऐति ऐति करना पड़ेगा, फिर उनको सबसे ज्यादा लेना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि सेंसेस भूखे रह जाएंगे। तो उनका कुछ टाइम बाद फिर ऐति ऐति हो जाएगा। कृष्णा कॉन्शियसनेस में हम नैति नैति नहीं बोल रहे हैं, हम तो बोल रहे हैं कि कृष्णा ऐति ऐति ऐति। कृष्णा ऐति मतलब सिर्फ कृष्णा को ही आप ज्यादा से ज्यादा जब आसक्त हो जाएंगे तो बाकी सब नैति अपने आप ही चला जाएगा। बिकॉज देयर इज अ परफेक्ट रिप्लेसमेंट ऑफ ऑल द सेंसेस। उनको लगता है कि सेंसेस को अगर ज्यादा प्लेजर नहीं दोगे तो सेंसेस डल हो जाएंगे, आसक्ति खत्म हो जाएगी, और फिर हम उस निराकार में मिल जाएंगे, जो कि एक रॉन्ग फिलोसफी है। क्योंकि भगवान ने भगवत गीता में 2nd चैप्टर बताया कि सेकंड आप सेंसेस को बिना प्लेजर फीड किए आप कंट्रोल कर ही नहीं सकते हो। सेंसेस को तो प्लेजर चाहिए ही चाहिए, बट लोअर को आपको हायर प्लेजर से रिप्लेस करना पड़ेगा। दैट वे यू कैन इजीली कम आउट ऑफ दिस मटेरियल वर्ल्ड एंड कंट्रोल द सेंसेस।
सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट, लेस देन 1 मिनट
यस,
लेफ्ट, वो ड्रॉप हो जाएगा बीच में।
हाँ हाँ, चलेगा चलेगा। वी कैन
प्रभु जी
क्लोज
एक
द
बस क्विक पॉइंट है प्रभु जी कि